Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Citizen Bear. Again, I remind you this is a podcast about my book, The Demonstrative Citizen. Actually, it's about some of the topics within The Demonstrative Citizen, and we take that and we talk about those topics as they relate to some of the things going on in our society today. And we have so many dramatic things going on in our world and in our society. I think it's important to kind of shed some light and put some perspective on it and maybe talk about it directly and not talk about it from every expert's point of view, because frankly, the experts got us into this mess. I think it's important to just sit back and take it just a guy's point of view, just an average person's point of view. And I'm hoping down the road that we can be able to do that and bring more people into this. And after this episode, we're going to start a rethink and a redevelopment, and I kind of want to do some new things with the podcast. But we're going to continue on, and I'm excited about finding some better topics and new topics and looking in our society and maybe having some people help us along the way with that. So let's dig in a little bit here in this episode, and I call this episode A Clear View. In this episode, I want to consider the many seasons that are implicit in these times. As was true in the book story, in times of great upheaval, there can be light contained within the darkness that envelops us. We get to choose how we'll react to both the good and the bad of these moments and what we use them for in our lives. In my book, The Demonstrative Citizen, there is a sense of change that occurs within all the characters. This is particularly true of my friend Bear. While he can never go back to his old life, he has become so much more than he ever imagined possible. And in doing so, found something he never really knew he had lost. And I think we've seen this throughout history with people. I think our greatest generation experienced this when they were faced with World War II. And I was just talking about this, where you can have them, many of these men and women, whether they went to war or stayed at home and worked the factories or took care of families and stuff, the home front, their lives were forever changed. And this is true all over the world. Europe, Asia, everyone's lives were incredibly changed. They could never go back. And for much of the world, the constitutional republic became the foundation of their lives in a new way forward, and the world has thrived on that. But there are some who went with the authoritarian route, and we are facing that dilemma today, that conflict with them. And I think but no one had the ability to ever really go back and have things the way they were. And I don't know that we really ever do get to do that. And I think when we are in those times and when we have so much upheaval and change, we find ourselves in a new way, and we find things within ourselves. And I think that's incredibly important and an incredibly important part of all of this as we go forward. We reaffirm things that are important, and we also understand the things that are wrong and that are bad. And we need to see those things clearly and not allow our vision of them to be obscured by dust in the air and anarchy in our streets. So moving right along, the Bible tells us in Ecclesiastes that to everything there is a season and a time to every matter under heaven. Bear faces unspeakable hardship and oppression from many of the leaders he hopes to defend, and we talked about that a little bit in the last episode. Yet at the same time, he finds faith, hope, and love, and the unrelenting spirit of the American people. All of this forces him to grow in his faith and to see the world around him through a very different lens. Ultimately, from it all, a new world emerges and a free society is renewed by the deeds of its people. And I think at the end of the book, this is a key factor, that it is the deeds of the American people that ultimately matter, not our leaders, not even the police, the guard. They all matter. They're all important. But it is the deeds and the priorities of the American people. Our choices matter because that is what will change our society for good or for bad. And we have to stand up and take a look at that and reaffirm these things before our choices become harder and harder. I don't think there's any question that in our society today there's a great deal of conflict and upheaval, and a lot of things have been allowed to fester for far too long. Excuse me. And as a result of that, I think very intentionally, this is a very intentional part of any great Marxist revolution, is to throw sand in the air through anarchy, to throw dust in the air with political noise, to scream, to shout. Any social upheaval, any antisocial behavior will do. And it helps obscure our vision of what's really going on. But it also can involve things from those who have gained some power in government or in leadership or in business. One of the things we've seen to this end also is censorship. And unfortunately, we've seen this grow around the world. We've seen this grow in the free world. We've experienced it here in America, particularly during the Biden years and the COVID. I mean, my God. We witnessed people who were complaining to their city board about threats against their safety because they had a business. And they would go to the city council or the town council, and they would be arrested. I mean, really? In America, you would be arrested for speaking unacceptable speak. I mean, I'm not talking about sitting there rallying people, but reading the threats against yourself, talking about how the government may have gone too far, talking about their business needs. This is why the council is there. This is why they have forums. Free speech is an open part. This is why we have free speech in this country. And yet, they would be just browbeaten, physically taken out and handcuffed and charged with some ridiculous aspect of a crime, disorderly conduct or something. It's nonsense. But the message was clear. There will be no dissent. There will be nothing but conformity. And these censorship like this took place in social media all the time. And I lived it. I have to tell you the truth. It was shocking to me to watch what was Twitter at the time, now X. I couldn't get any traction when I was advertising the book. And I got to tell you the truth. I would get shut down, and it would be a new rule and a new thing and something else. And I was actually losing members, followers. They had you tightened down. You couldn't get more followers if you didn't do this, and you couldn't do that because you hadn't done this. And oh my God, I just gave up. I was like, just no sense in using Twitter. Facebook turned out to be worse. Oh my God. They won't even let me download things from my site now. They didn't just not allow me to advertise. They won't even let me download writings from my site because things about the book because they just disagree or whatever. I don't know. The FBI doesn't want them to do it or whatever. I don't know what the deal is, but liberal ownership, I really don't know. But God knows they just keep closing me down. So I just won't use Facebook for that. That's fine. But with Elon Musk buying Twitter and turning it into X, I got to tell you, all of a sudden it changed. I went on with X and I was like, can I advertise? They're like, oh, we'd love to advertise. You can, here's the scope, here's the things. I advertised the book, put things out there, even some of my writings, that were about the book, kind of through Bear's lens, Bear talking to people about his experiences and what he thought of the world and what he thought was going on in our world today, from the main character, Bear. I thought it was a fun way to write and advertise the book. Apparently not for Facebook, but, or the early Twitter, but, on X, free society, man, was back. You could just advertise and, I can't say the advertising did a huge amount for me, but it was fun and they let me do it, right? So, I mean, the sting of censorship is out there and we've all lived with it and on one level or another. And it is a hallmark of a Marxist revolution. Again, we have to stop looking at the trees and start looking at the bigger picture of the forest and seeing this for what it really is. And it's been happening all over the world. I mean, and I've talked about this in the past. We've seen this in Germany. In Great Britain, it's just apparently, from what I'm understanding of Great Britain right now, it's totally nuts. I mean, you can't dissent against anything, free speech is all but done in Great Britain at this point, or at least in London. And that's just like shocking. I mean, shocking. But we've also seen the beginning and the foundation of a counter-revolution against all this. And it is a powerful statement, and it has come through the ballot box as an appropriate step, and we're seeing leadership that's beginning to emerge. And we're seeing this new leadership pushing back on this Marxist revolution, pushing back on this new world order and authoritarianism in the world. And we're starting to see a new mindset with many of our allies and with many of our partners. And we're starting to see people, I wouldn't say conforming, but joining in a new way forward. And that is taking this counter-revolution statement very powerfully. And we're seeing it both on the world stage and nationally. On the world stage, Europe is beginning to stand up. And with new countries that have come into NATO, we are seeing a robust resolve to protect themselves and to stand up to the threat that Russia is posing now in Europe. And the threat is very real, as the Ukrainians found out. Now, do I think Russia ultimately, in conventional terms, can take NATO or the European Union? No. But he can make a lot of trouble. And he can cause a lot of problems. And ultimately, if there is a nuclear exchange to get himself out of the pickle, no one wins. That's just insanity, but insanity seems to be ruling the day at the moment. So let's hope that doesn't go that far. I mean, at some point, pride has to be checked, and it has to be, we have to choose life, and we have to choose a better world. Even in the Cold War, the United States and the Soviet Union understood that. But we are seeing a counter-revolution against us, and that's also occurring in this country. The mayhem that has been going on in our streets, the absolute insanity in many of our cities, and the underwriting of that insanity by some political leaders is coming to an end. There is a pushback on this, and there needs to be a continued pushback on this. And we need to stop the problem of going out there and doing this. And I really want to speak to some people, the young people out there. And I know there are people of color and other things that are, or some ethnicity, who feel that this is important for them to join in because they are getting a moment and they've been disenfranchised, especially young men who are out there working on things. You're not helping yourself. You're helping the idiot who's using you to reach his political gains. You're not being helped by this. You're being harmed. If you're a father, get about being a father. You really want to be a father? I have been a father. And let me tell you, my life wasn't, privileged. My wife and I, the snot beat out of us more than once. And we fought our way back, and no one helped us. Not family, no one. Even people who should have cared about us looked the other way and often ridiculed us. And things were no fault of our own. We got through 2008. We got the hell beat out of us. We lost it all, but we built it back up. And we did it the old-fashioned way. We dug our teeth in and stood back to back, and we did it. And I got to tell you, it's been hard, and it's a bitter pill. But we fought our way back. But we never compromised on taking care of our son and doing other things. We never compromised on any of that. And it was a hard road. But we did take care of business. You don't get to make excuses when you're a father. You don't get to go home and say, well, you know what? I don't have a job because I was a jerk today. But guess what? Daddy still got a chip on his shoulder, so you should be proud. Forget it. Your job is not to have a chip on your shoulder. Your job is to make sure that you can have your children are taken care of and your family's taken care of and safe. Do the best you can. And sometimes it means not doing some things, but you have to go out there. And yes, there are battles worth fighting. And yes, we should stand up for things in this country. Absolutely. But don't get suckered into things that are not necessarily in your best interest. Don't get suckered into being someone else's pawn. Not at all, because that's not why you're here. And you should think about that. I mean, really. And I've seen it in too many really wonderful young men, and particularly young men, who are being told to have a chip on their shoulder. And it's the worst possible thing that you could do. Go out there, find a way forward, take care of your family, stand your ground. I can tell you, if you want respect, you want to be honored in this world, that's how you get there. Now, if you want to have money and you want to build a life, that's how you get there. You put your feet down and you put your face to the wind. Because the world isn't always fair, and it doesn't have anything to do with race, color, creed. I got news for you. Well, in some cases it does, but I mean, But ultimately, let me tell you something. It has always been a struggle in life, and things haven't changed much, but you can do that. In this country, given a chance, you can make something of yourself. So don't throw it away over making somebody else's political gains happen. Sorry. Didn't mean to digress there, but it breaks my heart to see really, really good young men being led astray on this. When I talk about a counter-revolution, I really am talking about us seeing the truth. And that's the American people, all of the American people, to see the truth and to see through some of this, to see through the lies and the rhetoric and those in the far left sown anarchy while casting disruption on their political rivals and all of it just to serve their own ideological goals. And let's make it very clear, we've witnessed this firsthand. You don't have to go very far. It's fresh in our memory. And it's not justified under any circumstances. That's why we have a free society. Recently, there's been, and in this kind of rhetoric and dispersions that have gone on, recently we saw something, once again, really heartbreaking in our country, and it's a school shooting out in Minnesota. In a Catholic school, 2 children were killed, others hurt. It breaks my heart. It's just completely unacceptable. Once again, the far left, the Marxists in our country, howl about gun control. Ironically, a key plank in their ideological ambitions. A proposition that has been part of the very Marxist movement inherent to every authoritarian regime. As I spoke about in our prior episode, this is also a clear segue into the overturning through ideological fiat to making it of our Constitution, making it nothing more than a parchment promise. Because if you can overturn the Second Amendment by just mandating it or legislating it, then you can overturn the entire Constitution. And you will, and they will. And I will tell you right now, we've talked about this before, you can expect it. Yet, in the midst of this, we hear nothing about more than 100,000 young people who died due to fentanyl, which poured in during an open border crisis. We should feel bad for their families and them too. The world has lost the richness of their lives too. The ideological far left movement of open borders, bringing that disease, that poison into our country. 100,000 young people died in a matter of a few years. But you don't hear the press talking about that. You don't hear the far left talking about it either. Not at all. Many of these people were school age. We've also, as I've talked about in the past, we're $37 trillion in debt, and virtually nothing has been spent on securing our schools. That's unbelievable. Do you know how much $37 trillion could buy for new school systems? And I don't even say we should have to spend it all. But we could harden, or with non-invasive measures, we could make our schools so much safer. All of our schools. Keep in mind that in 2008, our national debt was approximately $10 trillion. Of the preceding 16 years, 12 were under Democratic control. Let me do the math. We added in those 16 years approximately $26 trillion in debt. How are our children safer from these drugs? How are our streets safer from related crime? How have these Marxists acted with these funds to protect our schools with non-invasive measures? I'm sure it's not nothing, but it's probably nothing. Just as good as nothing. What may be most frightening of all is these attacks on our schools have ramped up with our debt and the Marxist assault on our society. Lest we forget, the Columbine attack, which many believed to be the start of this, and probably wasn't the first shooting, but it was really the beginning of this, occurred in 1999. A terrible massacre. In line with our debt, favoring of China, and I believe the Marxist assault on our society and the accompanying anarchy. This is not a coincidence. Are they being ordered? I don't know. But I can tell you, as I've said in the past, they're inspired. They're festered from the atmosphere that they create. We have been forced to look around and wonder what has happened to our free society when, in truth, the problem has been staring us in the face and lying to us. Nonetheless, I believe that if we pull together and stand firm in the face of this Marxist assault, a new day will dawn. From these new beginnings, we can reaffirm our liberties and our free society in general. We can also begin to reaffirm our commitment to workers and our own industrial and technological base. In this time, we also reaffirm our commitment to faith and its place in our society. This counter-revolution in our country against the Marxist assault and authoritarian globally represents a new season in our country and in the world, a season that has come none too early and, in my opinion, is long overdue. The violent rhetoric that we've seen from many of these leaders, chopping off people's heads and wanting to chop off heads and wanting to kill this person and want this person dead, and the violence, the political violence we have seen and the economic violence we have seen against candidates and, frankly, a lot of people in our country. The use of lawfare, it's just unheard of until a few years ago. Just is an inspiration to people who are on the fringe. And it's no coincidence that people who are associated over the last so many of these shootings, transgender people and struggling with an issue, a personal issue, pick up this hatred that comes from a party that identifies with them or claims to identify with them and causes them to go absolutely off the reservation when they're fragile and act out against the most innocent of our people, and that is completely unacceptable. And we can do better, and we should do better as a society. But the first step in that, and I've talked about this before, is this political rhetoric, the violent rhetoric, has to stop. But the Marxists will never, ever stop. That is part of their creed. That is how they try to win. That is how they have won in the past. This new season in the world represents far more than choosing a leader willing to take a bold action. This is a time beyond the ballot box, the jury box, maybe even beyond the cartridge box. This is a time of the common people clearly seeing what is happening in their country and in their world. A time to reaffirm the values and imperatives that make us not only free, but Americans. We are shaking off the yoke of the authoritarian who declares our values for us and uses every lever of power to enforce these social fiats against us. We are rising above the bureaucracy and the Marxist anarchy. We are not just unwilling to be intimidated. We have become and must become ready to enforce our authority over these minions. And I should be very clear about that. We the people, right? We, the people, have a right to say no more. And absolutely, no, I'm not going to be dragged out of here by the police. No, I'm not going to be deplatformed. No, I'm not going to be debanked or whatever else. No, I'm not going to be attacked by your crazy anarchist mob or whatever else you're doing or your political thing. And, I'm not interested in your violence. I'm done. And we're going to put the tools necessary to use it and do something about it. And yes, we do rise above authority, and we have a right to rise above it. It is called natural law. We talked about it with a little bit. And we should talk about this more, but this is the foundation of our country, of our ideals. And frankly, we've done it before. Lest we forget, that's how we became a country. We were ruled by Great Britain until we said, yeah, we're done with your rule and we don't respect it anymore. We're done with you. Get out. And we had to fight a war over it, but, they're out. More than any of these, we must reaffirm our commitment to God and each other, and I really believe this. At our heart, at our foundation, faith is an imperative that we cannot ignore. This is a time of choice. We must all stand on our values and choose what side of this conflict we are on. Do you side with the people and free society or the Marxists? Do you side with free society or do you side with the global authoritarians? No one is exempt from this choice, and no one will ultimately be able to safely sit it out. This includes our police. And I'm very supportive of our police. I want to add that. I think they have a hard job. And I think they're doing, and often do, a great job for us. And I think we should always be respectful and supportive. But simply following orders in many of these cases will no longer stand with the American people, as we saw during COVID. While we should all support our police, as I said, and they do have a difficult job, but we have a right to have expectations too. Police are going to have to ask themselves in the future, is this order legal and constitutional? The scenes of police hauling people away for speaking up at meetings, effectively silencing them, will no longer stand with the American people for very long. Police can no longer stand on ideological mandates or preferences and must respect the American people's rights. And I think this is true of everything from freedom of speech, the Second Amendment, right down the line. If you're not breaking the law, stop looking for a way to find out if you can harass them and beat them up and make them into a criminal. Go find somebody who's really a criminal. Support the American people. And I truly believe this, that we have to support each other. We need and must support our police in the war for our streets and our safe exercise of our liberties. For those acting under the protection of this Marxist revolution and terrorizing our streets, you have waived your right to the protection of free society. What you get is a fair trial, and more than likely prison sentence. I must say that I believe that we are seeing a new season in these areas. The police unions, the police officers, and many others, including some political leaders, are openly welcoming help in fighting the dangerous crime in our streets. This is a huge and new moment for our republic and seeing things as they are. It would appear that in our external war and the internal war being waged in our streets by our enemies, Marxist minions, is at hand. I held out great hope that peace in Europe would be sustained, that Putin might actually work with President Trump for an off-ramp. Clearly that was a lie, and it's not going to happen. That does not diminish President Trump. It's a great statement to his presidency and to his character to seek for peace, because the alternative is terrifying. But we should not shrink away from that just because it's scary. We should rise to it as we always, always have. And we should make a bold and united stand. This is the time of patriots and tyrants. Do not be fooled by false prophets standing against this far left mark. We shouldn't be fooled by false prophets. Standing against this far left Marxist movement and defending the Constitution is the path of the patriot. We can no longer indulge in those on the far left Marxists who speak of democracy and then turn against virtually every article of the Constitution. We can no longer entertain those who seek to destroy our way of life while enriching themselves in the very system they seek to destroy. More double talk and hypocrisy. We must choose a way forward. We must stand on our own 2 feet. And we must rise above this bureaucracy and everything else. We must enforce our beliefs over those who would put their beliefs on us, their tyranny on us, their anarchy on us. So let me reach into a little bit of conclusion here and just take a second and finish up. And I kind of want to just make a summary kind of statement on this. We must all see our nation, our world, and each other very clearly. We must prepare to rise above the politics and ideology and stand together against this Marxist in our midst. Marxists often reach their political goals and overturn societies because they are willing to sow anarchy and act with political violence. They have no boundaries, and in truth, they have no true moral imperatives. They simply seek a system that, like in the book Animal Farm, allows the pigs to become the farmers at the expense of everyone and everything else. Marxism is a Marxism is a mugging, that's what it is, to allow the communist plundering of a nation's wealth. Full stop. And you can look through history for that one. It is now the high time we got this out of our government and out of our country. Maybe the most dangerous aspect of it all. It is directly, wittingly, and indirectly, and sometimes unwittingly, supportive of our external enemies. It hampers us from making a united stand against external enemies and rallying the true strength of this country, the American people. We must win that internal war. As is true in the book, Bear wins the internal war so that we are free to win the external war. Yet here in America, we have a few very important differences to those nations who fell to Marxist and taxes, installed communism, or even fascism. Our Constitution is very robust and specific. While under assault from the far left, the ballot box remains strong. If we are seeing things clearly, if we don't allow the Marxist manipulation of free society, anarchy, and outright lies to sway us, we can stand our ground and take our country back and protect our liberties. Finally, and most importantly, our founders left behind a formidable army protected under the individual right of the Second Amendment. We will not be bullied. Not at all. We will not be overrun by misguided thugs in police uniforms, and we will not let anarchy go on forever. I am confident if they come after these Marxist leaders in force, you will hear cries for the National Guard or even the Marines to save their worthless asses. But it will be late. It will be too late. You already rallied against such actions. If they come after you in defense of their liberties, and I mean the great American militia, and I suspect they will if this continues, you should find a hole to go die in. We have, just so you know, we have tractors if you need to help dig the hole. Because this is an overwhelming force, and that is why our founders left it and enshrined it. Make no question, the great American militia, as I call it, not only lives, it has never been stronger, and it has never had more resolve. Just because it is quiet doesn't mean it's weak. And that is something that the Marxist in our midst should always see clearly.